people of the internet. I kind of wanted to speak on this Venezuela thing. What's happening in Venezuela, yo? I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's some things taking place in Venezuela right now because they too are coming off the backs of an election, a pretty intense election, and their people are revolting.
Turning now to Venezuela, where violent protests have erupted over allegations that Sunday's presidential election was stolen by the country's authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro. The opposition candidate, who was strongly favored in the polls, says he has proof that he won. Lilia Luciano is the only U.S. network correspondent in Venezuela.
It was widespread chaos on the streets of Venezuela Monday, as thousands of demonstrators across the country protested what they say was an attempt by President Nicolás Maduro to steal the country's presidential election. We were there as a brawl erupted in the capital, in Caracas.
A group of protesters in the front of the line throwing the canisters of tear gas back at police. There's a lot of police motorcycles here confronting them. You're seeing a lot of tear gas. The group of protesters back there, some of them told us that they assembled peacefully, and that's when police started arriving and all of this confrontation started taking place.
Soy Nicolás Maduro Moro, presidente.
Maduro claimed victory for a third six-year term, while challenger Edmundo González claimed to have the proof that he received 70% of the vote against Maduro's 30%. President Maduro took office in 2013, and during his presidency, more than 7 million citizens have fled the country over poverty and violence, many to the U.S.-Mexico border. Blanca Suarez was among those who fled with her young boys, but returned home to vote and hope for a regime change.
¿Qué venezolano va a salir a enfrentarse en una selva?
She says no Venezuelan would want to brave the jungle, risking violence, rape, and death, but says now it's a necessity for her.
Oh, man. So there you saw it, folks. I chuckled there for a second because, again, back to what I was saying before, where the lady said she fled the country for fear of her safety and, you know, the uproar that was happening with the case, but went back to go vote in hopes of her vote mattering towards the change that was going to take place. That's my stance, bro. Your vote doesn't matter. That's my stance. That's just my opinion. We're all entitled to our opinions as well, right? Your vote does not matter. How many more examples do you need of that? There's corruption everywhere. Clearly in Venezuela as well, too. This happens in a lot of countries, even my own country. Sierra Leone as well, too. There's a lot of candidates that you think are going to win. They put up their hopes, whatever the case is, and whether there's actual threats on people's lives for you to vote otherwise, whether there's some corruption, you know, where votes are not getting counted. This happens not just in America, but all over the world, clearly. So for you to know all these things are possible, but still walk down to the polls and vote, it's kind of strange to me. Don't you get it? There's powers that are higher than you that don't care about your vote. That's why I chuckled when the lady said that in that clip. Her situation's not funny at all. I'm not laughing at her or the situation. I'm laughing at the idea that people can see these things happening and still make their way down to the polls and vote. What are you voting for? Do you really think that your vote, you contributed to the greater decisions of the politics? It's bigger than you. It's an agenda that's bigger than you. Now, I bring this up because, of course, we're talking about politics. We're talking about Trump and this election right now here in America, of course, which is, you know, going to be one of the most make or break elections of our generation, in my personal opinion. I think it's going to be one of the ones that will make or break a lot of things moving forward, how society moves forward here in America moving forward. So to see that this is the reaction here in Venezuela, that, you know, people felt that one candidate should have won and he did not. The candidate himself was saying that, of course, he thought that he won 70-30 and he did not. And then, of course, another man won 3 years straight for a 6-year term. I think in Venezuela they say that they have 6-year terms. You know, this is his 3rd year straight going for a 6-year term, whatever the case, for a dude that they're saying has only led to corruption, poverty in the country, this, that, and the other. Again, you hear this narrative a lot in a lot of other countries as well, too. So I'm not trying to single out any specific country in particular as if this is just a problem that's happening there. It's happening all over the world. So I bring this up, of course, as America's facing up their election coming up as well, too. It makes you kind of wonder, how will we resolve? Well, how would we react if Trump wins? How would we react if Kamala wins? What are the streets going to look like? Are there going to be levels of protest, and to what degree? you know, if either party wins, and of course I said in my personal opinion, I feel like it's a lose-lose. If Trump wins, there's going to be a side of people, a demographic of people that are not going to be too happy about that. If Kamala Harris wins, again, in my personal opinion, I am going to throw in there the fact that she's an African-American woman. It would be the first time ever in history that it ever happened. I don't think there's people that are ready to see that here in this country. So either way, I think it's still a lose-lose. Even when it was, and not to make it a race thing for a second, even when it was President Biden and Trump, it was still, I feel like it was a lose-lose. Because again, both candidates, whether you know, been following their political history, whatever the case is, both candidates don't seem that fit to make the decisions that you would think need to be made here in America for the better of the common folk, or just American citizens altogether. So it seems a lot of like, there is a lot of just like, again, survival of the fittest, you know, whether the people with the money that are people that already have the money, the richest, whatever the case is, and, you know, the middle class or the lower class, people that are feeling maybe a little bit underrepresented, those are people that are going to feel the biggest blow of these, you know, make or break decisions, depending on who's in office. But again, I think there's agendas in place that are bigger than all of us. That doesn't really matter who's in office. It's going to go the way that they want it to go. Tim Pool said something I thought was interesting. Let me see if he said it on thing as well too. If he posted it on his YouTube. Tim Pool said something. He's a political commentator that I follow here on YouTube. He said something that he hit it on the nail of kind of what I thought all of this meant. He was talking about things that are taking place in Venezuela, and maybe that is a little bit of foreshadowing of what would maybe take place here in America. I just don't know to what degree. But I do know that people are on guard because of these things as well too, and feeling that you know, it's maybe a lose-lose, and we might have our own way of how we, you know, express that frustration if a political person wins that you didn't want to win, or whatever the case is.
We're very different from Venezuela, but we are seeing riots. We are seeing fires. We are seeing murders. We are seeing posters being torn down, statues being ripped from their bases. And people say, Tim, what happens in November in the United States? And I don't have a good answer, but we can certainly look at Venezuela. When you have an opposition party, when you have years after year after year, just decades of corruption in Venezuela from the socialists. I was in Venezuela 10 years ago during these protests, and it was the wealthier people protesting. I was accused of being CIA, sent to destabilize the revolution, and I fled the country. Good thing I did when I did. They probably would have put me in jail. Venezuela is not the same as the U.S., but we are looking at an election down the line, 97 days, 97, where no one's going to accept the results, no matter what happens.
No one's going to accept the results, whatever happens. If Trump wins, there's going to be a demographic of people that are not going to be too happy about that. If Kamala Harris wins, there's going to be a demographic of people that are not going to be too happy about that. My question is, how are they going to express that frustration? If the political person that you're voting for loses, how are you going to feel when that happens? I don't know, man. The world just feels a little bit weird right now, man. The world feels on edge. Now, of course, there's already been talks about civil wars. I spoke on that a couple of times as well, too, on my channel, where I feel like people are feeling the rumblings of civil war, the rumblings of racial tension. Things have just been growing on the rise in terms of just like civil unrest is what they would call it, right? So I agree with Tim Pool, man. Of course, maybe this thing that's happening in Venezuela and the countries just like it, where people will hit the streets, maybe, man. God forbid, of course, because nothing good ever comes from damage and destruction of your own city streets and people and arrests and police and clashing with this, that, and the other. But people are revolting. What does that look like in America? Again, it's a lose-lose, I feel like, man. I feel like there's going to be demographics of people that are not going to be happy with who loses. If their candidate that they want to win loses, we'll see how they want to express that, man. So I don't know. These are some things that have just been popping up on my timeline that hold interest to me. I don't know if they hold interest to you. But I just think that you should be aware because, again, it's going to affect you. Whether you're a person that cares about politics or not, it's going to affect you to some degree, right? Because you could be hearing all of this and be like, man, who cares? I'm not going to vote. And I feel you because I don't vote either. But you got to be aware that these are things that are happening, because these could be, the signs and the foreshadowing of things that could take place and will be a part of your reality soon enough. Again, you heard of 97 days. I think that's pretty accurate. 97 days from here to October, November, whatever case is, when the U.S. presidential election takes place. Who knows? Who knows what's going to transpire? Who knows? It's just been a lot of things that's just this year alone, man. This year alone has been making me feel a little bit uneasy. I've been a little bit more so focused on myself and my own well-being, that of myself and my loved ones, whatever the cases here and there, whatever the cases, colleagues, whatever. But I'm starting to be a little bit more intentional about my energy as well too. I always say this as well too on this platform, man. Like, now that you're aware that this is the reality and the arena that which you dwell in, you should be a little bit more intentional about what you're doing with your time and energy, just in case you can't, do the things that you thought you had the time to do, or the resources to do, or the luxury to do. Will those luxuries always be there? Will the time and the energy and the means always be there? Remember the pandemic? Pandemic came out of nowhere and set a lot of us back, myself included. Plans out the window, finances out the window, savings, career goals, this, that, relationships were kind of on hold while we maneuvered through the waters of that whole pandemic. And, social isolation and, wearing masks and vaccines and this, that, and the other. So with this election coming up as well too, man, again, you might think that it's no effect to you, but it might affect us in some degree, some more than others, again, depending on where you live in the world, depending on your financial status, your political beliefs, this and the other. I don't know, folks. It's just not. These are things that I'm aware of, and of course, like I said, of course, earlier on, I'm not trying to harp or doomsday, doom scroll or doomsday prep or whatever the case, however you want to call it. I'm not trying to impose a fear of you at all, but it's just like the reality is looking a little bit grim, if you ask me. But that's just my take. Of course, I want to hear yours down in the comment section for sure, man. Let me know what you guys think about all these things happening here in America, here in these other countries. You're seeing how other countries are handling their elections. You're seeing the things that are happening in the world that feel like just echo and just seeing out it's calling out for just more degeneracy. There's a lot of things that I'm questioning. I'm wondering, is this sustainable? Is this way of life sustainable? How much more of this can we take on as a society until it breaks? There's going to be things that are happening that are people going to be fed up with and be like, you know what, enough is enough. And what happens when people say enough is enough? Usually when people say enough is enough, or they're just fed up, or their back is against the wall, they feel like they've been patient, or they've exhausted all their resources, they've tried, they've begged, they've pleaded, and they're still not seeing any type of resolve. Usually when people say enough is enough, the things that come after that are not a pretty sight. It's not pretty to look at, to witness. Your mom ever told you enough is enough? When your mom's been telling you, your parents been telling you, hey, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that. And then they say, you know what, enough is enough. And they do what they didn't want to do. That's what I feel like we're kind of facing as a society in this world. Because the way that we're moving is not sustainable. The way that we're moving in this world is not sustainable. It's not funny. You think it's a joke now, but it's not going to be funny when enough is enough. You get what I'm saying?